Hello, everybody, and thanks for listening. So, it's been 10 years after that deadly quake that happened in Haiti. And so, this article I was looking at, it was among many other articles, of course, that I found interesting. And so, I thought I was going to put more than one article in here. So, this one says 10 years after deadly Haiti quake, survivors feel forgotten, which doesn't seem like a surprise to me. So here's a woman right here, a Haitian woman, and it's Herlandi Mitali was left disabled by the deadly earthquake that struck Haiti in January of 2010, and now she says she feels forgotten. So here she is here, and so she looks like she's in a wheelchair. And so Port-au-Prince, 10 years ago, Herlandi Matili Armatili, so excuse me for mispronouncing her name. She was left disabled by the massive earthquake that devastated Haiti. So today she uses a wheelchair, jury rigged with a piece of string, which means she cannot go that far. So she has to stay pretty much isolated in one, or at least confined to one spot, or she can't go too far. So as a result, she is trapped in her village outside of Port-au-Prince. So it was meant to be a model for reconstruction of the country after the disaster. Instead, the 36-year-old Matilde, who once worked in the capital, is dependent on her neighbors to survive. So the doctor told me that if I went to a physical therapy, I might walk again, but you have to go into the city for that, and you need money for public transportation, and I don't have any, she explained. And that's how I have become even more handicapped, and then I was to begin with. So she says that she's more handicapped because of that, being confined and not having the money to travel for physical therapy. So added Matilde, so who has mental plates screwed into her hip and her spine. Before January the 12th, 2010, she did not know a thing about earthquakes or the damage that they can do. But on Tuesday, more than 200,000 Haitians were killed by the roaring trembler. Many of them were crushed to death, and that was because of the substandard concrete buildings crumbling on top of them. So Matilde was rescued from the debris 8 days after the 7.0 magnitude quake. She was alive. She made it through that, but gravely injured. So Pote-Macan village, after months of the makeshift camp, hundreds of which dotted the Port-au-Prince landscape after the tragedy, Matilde and her two daughters ended up in the village Lomaine Casimir. So that's named for one of the Haiti's greatest singers. So I may have mispronounced that, so excuse me for that. But this is a sad story. The community, about 20 kilometers, 12 miles out Port-au-Prince, was created by the government, which offered lodging there to about 50 people disabled by the quake. And so the community was to have 3,000 quake-resistant homes, a market, and an industrial area, a police, a fire station, a school, and a pharmacy. So on paper, it was a dream community, but the plans never came to fruition. So like hundreds of the other construction sites during the decade when the Caribbean program was running, the village was abandoned in 2014 with more than half the buildings undone. So it was scandal and corruption. So the ambitious project died in the swirling Caribbean corruption controversy that sparked an eruption of public anger in 2018, anger that remains till this day. So since the middle of the year, the public has regularly demonstrated in Haiti calling for more transparency in how the funds from Venezuela Petro Caribbean program were handled. So the scheme had allowed struggle struggling Haitians to buy petroleum products more cheaply and on credit, but it was plagued by the allegations of misuse of aid money allocated by Caracas. And so the financial upheaval that resulted from the scandal doomed the village project, and the public administrative offices on site to collect rent closed, creating a sort of real estate loophole. So people kept coming to the complex because all of a sudden it was a great deal. So I came to live here because rent had become too high in my old neighborhood, explained William St. Pierre. And so, who simply squatted in one of the vacant houses. So the people are still struggling in Hades, y'all. And so it really hasn't been over. And I'm going to add to this. I know this is a whole nother country, a whole nother state that I'm about to mention, but I don't think Louisiana, after the Hurricane Katrina, I don't think the people really came back from that too well either, because I've heard some people say some people are still struggling from that as well. And then what just happened in there was I don't know if it was Aruba or another country where the people were flooded. There was something that happened there, and the Trump administration closed them off, didn't want to give them aid. And then also, I think Puerto Rico, when they had their natural disaster, he just visited out there and gave them like boxes of tissue and threw it at them. And I heard that they have problems with lighting and some other issues. And so all of these countries, they just sort of forget about them, and the people just continue to struggle on, and it's really sad. But and then here we got homelessness in the U.S., and these people, what they do is they have money to clean up and push them away, but they don't have money to create more housing, and housing that is reasonable, where the rents are not 2 and 3K a month. So it seems like it's happening everywhere. So St. Pierre pays no rent for his 2-room dwelling and doesn't pay any taxes on his off-book drinks business. But he also likes the safety of the village with its neatly arranged, brightly colored homes. So in the cities, after 5 or 6 o'clock, you have to stay inside, and the doors have iron gates. And look around us at my little wooden door at the house are the homes without a security wall, St. Pierre said. I'm getting too old to hear gunshots at all hours of the day and night, added the 62-year-old. So there's isolation. Despite some benefits, including the absence of gang violence, village Lumaine, Casimir, is nevertheless geographically isolated without any officials to run it. So that puts its most vulnerable residents even at higher risk. So Matilde cannot get around, so she cannot find a job, so she can get her back on her feet, and so she gets no public assistance, and so she has to rely on handouts from her neighbors. So sometimes I've wanted to die, she admits, once her daughters aged 12 and 16 are out of the earshot. And so when my neighbors cook, they call my little one and tell her to come get a bowl for me, she says, tapping nervously on her damaged wheelchair. Before January 12th, the quake, we got by, but now I'm worse than a baby. And so in the village, which is effectively run by the residents themselves, those still suffering from injuries sustained by the quake, and those who came seeking a better life, say they feel forgotten by the government. And so if we had to wait for them to make good on their promise, we would be dead, Matilde says. There is no government. I am my own government. And so how do you like that story? That is really sad. And so that is just but one of many stories that I've heard, and I believe there's 6 other photos showing some of the people that are pretty much in this area and isolated, and they have to like rely on their own wills to get by. And so that's pretty much it. And this is Matilde, Herlande Matilde, and her in her wheelchair. And so this is a really sad story, and I thought I would bring this to light, but it just seems like it's happening everywhere, and I don't know if people are really paying attention to what is going on in the world, but a lot of these destructions or a lot of these things that are happening, the high rents that are happening in the US and the homelessness that is growing and increasing, just seems like it doesn't get any better. So with that being said, until the next video, thanks for listening.